On and we'll go. Good evening. This is Dale Lamb, Gardner Webb. This is Mels 603. Appreciate you joining me for the last go round. This is our last class of the session. So we'll start as we always do. This week, I had a couple documents for you, the future of public education, charter and private schools. Those are growing very rapidly, and we'll talk about those a little bit more in a minute. Your task stream work, you were to complete task stream task 1, CAP task 1 for task stream. Just as a reminder, I'm not saying it a whole lot, but more than I want to. Please remember, the state has identified 5 areas that they want to see recommendations for improvement on. You're to find the lowest area on either the Teacher Working Conditions Survey in North Carolina or the Advanced Ed Survey in South Carolina in those 5 areas, and I should see at least 1 recommendation for each of those areas. You can add more. You can have managing student conduct if that's a problem in your building, but you can't substitute that for one of the required 5. Time, resources, facilities, school leadership, teacher leadership, which we know as empowerment. I must see a recommendation to improve those 5 areas. If you don't do that in task 1, then you get sideways, and by the time you get to your CAP cultural advocacy plan, you don't have anything to plan around. So this will help you. For those of you who haven't made it there yet, try to get there before fall session starts. You got 4 weeks. Fall session doesn't start until the 27th of August, so make sure. Or the 28th. Let's see. It's that last Monday in August before fall starts back. You need to roll into 605 with a good sound start on the CAP if you're going to get finished this fall. So make sure you do that. Anybody have any questions on what you need to do for task stream? All right. Now, please remember, this semester all you had to do was your evidence artifact work and your disposition. You didn't have to do anything else. Any other things to do? Now, you will need to put around the competencies in your competency folio. And please remember, competency folio is not competency analysis. Competency folio, we want things. We don't want narratives. That's what goes in competency analysis. You wrote those in task 4 of each, the OMA and the SCIP. You did your competency analysis in those this summer. I want competency folio, artifacts, things, proof of the things that you did. Please remember that. All right. I'll close that document. Okay. And I can close that document. So again, please remember, you had this summer, you were due the OMA and the SCIP, School of Ed dispositions, and start on the CAP. That's what was due. So again, no competency analysis. You did that in both task 4s this summer of the SCIP and the OMA. You will need to do your competency folio, 21 artifact proofs in there from this summer session. All right. I can close task stream now. All right. And as I said, complete task 1 was what you were to do in task stream this week. I can close that. All right. Charters and private schools are somewhat controversial now. Not that they aren't good or not that they don't deserve a place. The controversy is around funding. As we all know, courts usually have disallowed direct state financial support to private, parochial, and charter schools. That is no longer the case. As you know, in North Carolina, we now have a section in DPI for charter schools. We have many charter schools, and they are a growing part of the landscape in North Carolina. They are growing faster than anything else, but because public schools aren't growing because they're already there. Um, so the issue becomes funding for charter schools and private and parochial schools. So let me kind of differentiate that for you. Funding for charter schools comes just like it comes from the state to public schools. You get a per pupil amount for each pupil that's in attendance. The problem arises, the controversy arises in, please remember that in '66, states got out of funding buildings and keeping them up, capital. The local is responsible for that. School districts don't want to be building schools for charter schools. And so the law is very clear. All of the local education agency or the LEA, the county schools or the city schools, all they have to do is provide classrooms. And so that's why they give charter schools their old disused mobile units. But they don't have to give them any more than that. And so charter schools have to develop their own funding sources and streams, and some of them are private corporations, but others that are local initiatives, they have to find a way for their capital needs, because the county will not only give them used trailers. The state gives them per pupil and the teacher allotment, but does not give them buildings, just like they don't give Rutherford County Schools or Cleveland County Schools or Guilford County Schools. They don't give them buildings. The local taxpayer has to pay for that. We've talked about that. The problem with all these corporate giveaways in North and South Carolina is that you don't get any tax revenue from these corporations moving in terms of property taxes. There's no money for schools, for capital. So every time you see a Facebook in Rutherford County get a $10 million tax relief, that's $10 million less going to schools. That's the way it works. So it's not just charters and privates that are having trouble with capital needs. It's also public schools, because North Carolina overbuilt community colleges and technical schools. North Carolina has 58 community and technical colleges, and all of them have satellites. I think we have one in 96 of the 100 counties in North Carolina. Those have to be funded. Their capital needs have to be taken care of through the county commissioners as well. So it's not like the schools are the only thing that have to be funded in terms of capital needs. K-12 schools, also community colleges have to be funded, just like the public schools do. And as we all should know from our earlier discussions this semester, the problem is that the first 58, not all the satellite campuses, but the first 58 community colleges, the youngest one of those is 51 years old. And the oldest, I believe, is 56 or 7 years old. Help me, Dr. Pickard. 63, 64, 62, 63, 64. We started building community colleges.
54. Yeah, 54.
And so you're talking about all the first 58 community and technical colleges, not the satellite campuses. Many of them are old as well. But the first 58 community and technical colleges are all in excess of 50 years old. Can you think, can you imagine what infrastructure you would need on a campus that's more than 50 years old? I mean, they could buy all the computers in the world, but they don't have internet. They don't have enough electricity in the rooms to power them all. The fans for the servers, backup power. Community colleges need to be upfitted. Roofs, handicap access. Community colleges, the initial 58 campuses are a train wreck financially. Isothermal Community College got a new president when Walter Dalton did not win the governorship in, what year was that? I guess he ran against McCrory. When McCrory got in the first time, so that was 5 years. But anyway, when he came out of state government as the lieutenant governor in North Carolina, he was appointed president of Isothermal Community College in Spindale, North Carolina. As soon as he got there, he was appalled at the conditions. He walked around the campus and looked, and he got some folks to come in, some local people for free, to do an inventory assessment of the facilities. And they told him that just, to be open, that there needed to be $55 million worth of capital improvements just to open the buildings, because that campus had never been upgraded. Now, he has started the capital campaign and has done some things. Is trying to build a new building for technology now. It's still in the dirt, but he has got it started. But that's what all of them are facing. And remember, they feed from the same trough as 12 K-12 schools do. They have to go to the county commissioners hat in hand and ask for the money. Please remember, in North and South Carolina, the school boards are unempowered. They can't levy their own taxes. They have to ask and be given the money from the county commissioners. And so public schools have to line up right alongside community colleges, and that's a problem. So if they don't have any, so you said, Dale, why are you belaboring the point? We're talking about charter schools now. Well, I'm framing the context here, because the public schools themselves can't even meet their own needs in capital. How willing do you think they are to give somebody else a slice of that little pie they've got already? So when you say, well, boy, it sure is not very professional of them to only give charter schools a few old used trailers, that's all they've got. They can't even keep up with their own capital needs, much less give money to charter schools. And so they pretty much follow the letter of the law. If you want some classrooms from your local education agency, your local school district, they'll give you a few trailers, but that's it. And they won't give you ones that are actually usable. They're going to give you the ones that have been taken out of service. And old school buses, you see these charter schools, they got those old school buses, the ones that were rotated out of service. That's what they give the charter schools as well. And so obviously that causes a bit of friction between charter schools and public schools. That's where the controversy comes from. It's all about money. The state takes care of teachers and per pupil. It's the facilities and the capital needs is where the anger and the controversy arises, which is not a state issue. That's a local initiative. So the courts usually said no, but now with charter schools, which are technically public schools, they can get some trailers. Now, the private and parochial schools never got any public money until recently. There are some opportunity grants. There are some vouchers for low wealth areas that have low performing schools. There is some state money, some voucher money to send kids to private schools or parochial schools. The conflict that arises there is parents think that they ought to be given enough to pay for the entire tuition. I'm at the lake house tonight in Lake Norman. I'm literally just across the street from the town of Davidson and Davidson College. It's here on the east side of the lake. When the leaves are off and I look out the back door across the water, I can see some of the buildings over there on their campuses, a mile or so away as the crow flies. There's a private school over there. There's a charter school here locally. There's a church school. There's a parochial. There's a Catholic school here. There's one of everything right here within rock throwing distance of my house. The problem is those opportunity vouchers that the state gives out are worth about $3,800 a year. Davidson Day School is about $17,500 a year for the lower school, and it's a little more than that for the upper school, more than $20,000 range. That's pretty much what South Lake Christian is. The charter school is free. So you can imagine the waiting list to get into Lake Norman Charter, because the privates here are so expensive. And if you were to get a voucher, you'd still owe probably $15,000, $16,000 a year on your child's education. The whole point of those was for people who couldn't afford it, but $3,800 doesn't make them afford it any more than having no dollars. So it's It doesn't make the people happy that believe that money shouldn't go to private, state money shouldn't go to private school, but it doesn't make the folks who are getting them any happier because they can't afford to go. That $3,800 might as well be 38 cents in terms of being able to pay the remainder of what private schools cost now. So again, there's another conflict. Now, here are the arguments. Parents should have freedom of choice in the education of their children. Yeah, you have freedom of choice, but that doesn't mean that somebody else is going to pay for it. See, the controversy arises when parents say, I should have freedom of choice, but somebody else has to pay for it. That's not happening. So that's where it is. And so I've got some slides here about the history of this with the landmark court cases, of course, as I always have for you. But again, you know, the real issue here is money. We haven't gotten past the money to even discuss some of the other ramifications of charters and privates, which are, of course, quality of education, racial desegregation, or resegregation, some of those issues, separation of church and state. There's a whole bunch of social issues or social activist issues surrounding these schools. My point tonight is to tell you, don't get into that. As you know, that's a career killer. Don't get into that part of it, the social political part. The issue that you need to be aware of is the financial piece. That's where you need to do your study, do your homework, know your background. It wouldn't be smart to go out and start advocating one position or the other based on all these other societal factors. The real issue for professional educators is money. Where's it going to come from? Who's going to lose? Who's going to get knocked out of the trough of the public funds? When somebody goes up, somebody's got to come down. There's not infinite resources out there, and so the real argument again, of course, is financial. Please remember, charter schools are public schools. They do get state funding for teachers and per pupil. They do not get state funding for capital, which is buildings and grounds, upkeep, technology. Those are considered capital. All public schools in the district have to provide them or use trailers. Just says classrooms, which means use trailers. Public schools don't have to give private schools anything. The issue there is that parents who get those vouchers for private schools don't get nearly enough to pay for the private school, unless they can get some kind of a scholarship program. And so what that means is most kids who can't afford it that get to go to private school are there on some kind of a scholarship, whether it be academic or athletic. And that again creates another problem in terms of segregation, but we won't veer off into that. So those are your issues, and that's the future of public education as I know it. The issue is going to be who funds, who gets the money going forward. All right. I do want to spend a little time with you tonight on interviewing. I know that some of you are already interviewing or want to interview before the summer's over. Certainly you're going to try to interview in the fall because you'll be finishing in Christmas. In case that I don't get back with you, I want to do a little introduction to interviewing tonight to give you a little notion of what to expect. So the first document that I have for you is the 4 types of interviews that you can expect when you interview to be an assistant principal. There are 4 distinct types. There's the applicant pool interview, there's the group interview, the principal interview, and then the superintendent interview. All of these are completely different. They have different goals, aims, and objectives. You better know what kind of interview you're having in order to be prepared. So let me work through these with you quickly tonight. The applicant pool interview is for large districts. That have literally hundreds of applicants. You're not applying for a job. You're applying to get in the pool to be referred out for interviews for a job. It's a little different. So the first kind of interview you're going to have is what we call a strength finder interview, which is from the Gallup Corporation, and it's a dispositional. It's a dispositional interview to separate the wheat from the chaff. What it does is it gets the numbers down more manageable. The district is looking to try to figure out who dispositionally is suited to be in this business. They won't ask you to schedule a school. They won't ask you about a 4x4 block. They're going to ask you things about your disposition. And there are some landmine questions. A question like, are you always on time? The answer to that question is yes. The most important thing in a dispositional interview, whether it's written or whether somebody's asking you these questions or whether you're taking it online, the most important thing is to be certain. You have to give them an answer. You can't give them an essay. They want an answer. That question is binary. You know, there's only two choices. Either you're on time all the time or you're not. And the correct answer is yes. Why is that important? Well, schools run on time. Buses run at the same time every day. Bell rings the same time for every period. I mean, it's a very time-conscious business. If you're not an on-time person, you usually don't make it in the school business. I mean, I've had people come into when I was principal at Early Start High School, we had 3,000 kids. They started coming rolling in right after 6 o'clock. And we rang the first bell at 6:55, and we started class at 7 o'clock. Had an AP applicant came in and said, "I'm not really a morning person." Well, then why are you here? We're not going to hold the buses back 2 hours till you can get up and get you some coffee and get to work. You know, that's a dispositional problem in our business. Are you competitive? Yes. You need to understand that we keep score for a reason in this business. That's why you have state report cards. Don't go in and say something stupid like, "I don't believe in standardized testing." That's the corner of the realm. That's the way we keep score in this business. Mostly they're looking to make sure you're dependable, you're loyal, you're honest, you're ethical, you're hardworking, you're responsible. You're not going to be on the front page when I click on my Google News feed. You're not going to be on TMZ, in the drunk tank. They're looking for your personal characteristics, that you're a fully formed adult that can be trusted with the keys to the building. That's what they're looking for in this set of interviews. Usually the questions come in rounds of 12. Each of the rounds of 12 have a landmine question. If you answer that question incorrectly, they will continue on to the end of that section and you will be done. So if you don't get all the way through the 5 sections, it's hard to score 44 out of 60 if you don't get to answer all 60 questions. So who we got online here that's paying attention to that? Everybody's clicking off. All right, Andrea Lynn King. Unmute. I'll unmute you. All right, so here's the question tonight. This is landmine question number 2, and probably the one that people debate the most in terms of what the right answer is. So the question is asked, and you have to make a choice. You can't give me you can't pontificate or essay on me here. If it paid the same, would you rather be a teacher or a principal if it paid exactly the same?
Sounds tough. If it paid the same, probably a teacher, because I think that generally speaking, the kids are easier to work with than the adults.
There you go. Good answer, but you just got knocked out. That's wrong. What kind of job you interviewing for?
See, that wasn't part of the question.
Pardon?
At the interview, the answer is a principal, absolutely, 100%.
Absolutely it is. Because you're changing careers. You're going from working with students to working with adults when you become an administrator. So it is a trick question, and they'll kind of lull you into a sense of security, and you'll say, man, I'd just love to work with them kids. Sorry. It is a good answer, but it's the wrong answer. The answer to that question, of course, is I want to work with adults. I love working with adults. Nothing would make me happier than to get to work with a bunch of grumbly adults. So those are the kinds of things, are you competitive? Did you do well in school? I mean, they'll ask you those kinds of things. They're trying to perceive, are you what we know in the business as, are you a school person? The last one here, Kelly, can you unmute? I'll ask you. Now, this one, I get people that get mad sometimes when I go over this. As a principal or assistant principal, should you socialize with your teachers? Shelly, what's the answer? Let me unmute Shelly so she can tell us the answer. Shelly's not letting me unmute her. There we go. Shelly, what's the answer? Should assistant principal socialize with the teachers?
No.
And the answer is yes.
Oh, no. Darn it.
You have to be a servant leader. You have to be collaborative. Now, I'm not talking about going out drinking after work. I'm talking.
Well, see, that's the clarification. You say.
Well, but there won't be a clarification. They're not going to give you the answer. It wrapped up in the question. They're not going to do that. The bigger idea here is yes, you should be willing to be one of these people. You must work right alongside them. You should be involved in social activities in the community right along with them. I didn't say anything about going out and drinking. So that's what you was thinking. That's on you. You were assuming that we're going to go out to, we were going to be out at Hooters eating fried chicken wings and drinking beer. I know.
All right.
And so Stephanie said that socializing is not collaboration, but it leads to collaboration. That's a good point. You're not out socializing with people to collaborate for work, but you can't collaborate many times until you can kind of come together and have some sort of a common ground where you communicate. So those are the kinds of things that you're going to be doing as a boundaries are important though. Well, nobody said that you had to take them home with you and put them up in your guest room. What we're talking about is being a part of the community and being seen as a community member. For a long time, even when I was first principal, we were required to live, and superintendents still are, required to live in the communities where you work. And there was a reason why. We've lost that over the years. And so, but we understand how important that is. So could the answer be, it depends on what you know. It cannot be that. You have to give a certain answer. You can't ask any questions. You can't ask for clarification. This is not a spelling bee. We can't use that word in the context of a sentence. What does it say? Perception was cliquish. That's when you're going out drinking together. That's not the socialization that we're talking about. We're talking about being involved in community activities and being a part of the community. Everybody thinks, say socialization, everybody thinks we're talking about drinking. We're not talking about the going out and drinking part. We're talking about, should you be an active member socially of the community, along with your teachers and the rest of your staff? And the answer is yes. Again, I've got it right here. Be certain. Don't ask questions of the question. They'll just reread. All they'll do is reread the question to you and give you a 0, no matter if they have to reread the question, they'll just give you a 0. You get no points. That means you aren't certain. You're looking You're looking for somebody to tell you the answer in the question. So if you ask a question, they'll nod, read it to you again, and smile, and write the 0 down and go on. That's the way it works. So if you get a dispositional Gallup Strength Finder type interview, they'll tell you up front, you got to give us an answer. Can't be an essay, can't be contingency answers, can't be based on, can't be put in, you must give us an answer.
Dr. Lamb, can I add 2 cents to this?
Yes.
Folks, to piggyback what Dr. Lamb is saying about collaboration, you need to pick up, if you haven't already, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Leadership. I'm paraphrasing, but he talks a lot about collaboration and working as a team for a common purpose. So, you become part of the team. You're the team leader, but you're also part of the team, and your idea is to cultivate leadership within your school, but you can't do that if you separate yourself from the mainstream of those elements that it's important to your staff. So make yourself available, make yourself part of the team. That's the only way they're going to build trust in you, is to know who you are and what you're about.
Shared governance, shared leadership, servant leadership, transformational leadership. You'll learn all of those things next semester. We'll cover Strength Finder. The book will be one of your required texts next semester, and we'll work with you on these things. And hopefully it will become a lot more clear. Thank you, Dr. Pickard, for that explanation. He's exactly right. We know that one of the 7 habits of highly effective people is that they collaborate and communicate with others. And many times it takes a social setting to break the ice that you might never be able to do. One of the things that we do at Gardner Webb is a couple of times a year we're required to be out in the community at some social event. It's just good practice as a member of our community. And so I try to do the little golf tournaments over at River Bend. The last one I did was with cities and schools. We go over, volunteer our time. We actually pay and play, and we help them with those kinds of things. It brings about a lot of goodwill and collaboration in our community. I went recently and set up and helped the local school district where the college is set up their Principal of the Year interviews because they had a purpose in mind this year. They wanted a system that would select the principal that had the best chance of being competitive at the district and the state level in the competition, and not just be a reward system for somebody local. So I had to go in and explain a process organizationally how you would do that. Well, I live, in the community there. I have a house nearby. I'm involved in social and charitable and church functions and those kinds of things in that community, because that's what school leaders, whether it's K-12 or whether it's college, that's the expectation that you have. I know that you don't see that as much in the urban areas. I was in Charlotte for 20 years, hadn't done 12 or so out in rural areas, but it still made a difference in Charlotte as well. You can't get away from, with your staff, you can't get away from that collaborative part. You need to be seen as more than just who your job is. If you want to get people to trust and believe in you and follow you, there has to be, they don't have to exactly like you. It helps, but you must be seen as being willing to put your shoulder to the wheel as well, and be a part of the community. And so
you have to develop that trust factor. That's imperative that you do that. You cannot do that. I'm sorry, Dr. Lemon, I don't mean to cut in. You can't do that if they don't know who you are and what you're about. Covey lends itself to this study a lot, and one of your goals is to cultivate leadership among your staff. And that requires building trust and getting to know your people and them getting to know you. It's a two-way street. And you can't do that if you keep yourself at arm's distance. So you got to realize how important this element is building trust among, I know I've talked about it all semester, building trust among your staff, which incorporates them understanding who you are and what you're about, so you can go about and building leadership in your school and finding those pearls in your staff that really can cultivate leadership and become leaders like you've become.
You know, one of the things that we just kind of assume and don't really think about when we talk about shared governance in schools is that you have to develop those teacher leaders so that they can share in that governance. You don't want the village idiot being in charge of anything, ever. So you have to develop that leadership within them. And it takes that personal relationship. Shared governance won't work if nobody knows anything. If you've not developed them, if you don't have trust in them, if you haven't worked with them and to increase their professional capacity, then they won't have, even if you give them the opportunity to lead, they won't be able to. And again, leadership is about building relationships. It's as simple as that. And a lot of what they're trying to determine through this Gallup dispositional is, do you have the capacity to lead people and to lead them to be better, and a synergy where you get more out of the school than the sum of its parts? Can you do that? They're trying, it's a hard thing. I'm not telling you it's something that's easily defined. It's like trying to nail Jell-O to the wall. I get it. But that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to determine, do you have that it factor? Because that's what they're looking for. We're not looking for average people anymore. We're looking for people who have the potential to be great, to be stars. Good to great, Jim Collins. We're looking for people that are good, that have the potential, if we as the district develop them to be great. And part of that being great is, can they develop their staff? Can those of us who are hiring them develop them, and then in turn, can they develop the staff that they lead? It's a pretty accurate system, by the way. It will identify who your stars are. I was trained for a year in Gallup 20 some odd years ago. The first star that I identified in Charlotte Mecklenburg was Mark Robertson, who works for us now, who retired from Charlotte Mecklenburg as one of the most highly decorated principals that they ever had. I was pretty lucky. I don't think I missed on a one. But the system is so complete and it's so hard to learn. It takes a whole year of training. But if you get it down, it's unbelievably accurate. But if you know what you're doing and you really have these skills and abilities, it will pick you out of the crowd. It will pick you out. You won't just be one of many. This is the way you get your foot in the door. Another one of the applicant pool strategies is doing in-basket activity, which is a reasoning activity. They're trying to determine how well you reason. The one that I have here, and y'all better get this right. All right, it has a group of emails, and within these emails, there's two landmines that you better not miss. Let's see. The first one is number 2. Read number 2 there and tell me what the landmine is in that one. We covered it this semester in school law. Anybody want to venture a guess where the landmine is in that one? Nobody? I thought somebody would chime in. Can a school administrator talk to the press without having gone through the public information office in your district? No. What's the illegal part of the request that the reporter has made, according to FERPA? You can't give them access to students. Can't even take pictures of a kid. You certainly can't let the press come into your building and interview kids. When you see these interviews when something's happened at a school, you know they're standing out in the front yard across from the school and trying to get kids to walk off school property and talk to them. They're talking to parents in cars. Why do you think that is? They're not allowed to do that on school property. It's a violation of federal law. You can't take a bunch of kids down and let them be interviewed on camera. That's a FERPA violation of their privacy rights. No student access. That's exactly right. They wait at the end of the parking lot. That's exactly right. They wait out there on Sandy Porter. There are some landmines in many of these, but this is a fireable offense to talk to public information. Well, maybe that's probably just a reprimand, but letting kids be on camera with bringing media in and putting kids on camera, oh my, that's a fireable offense. You got to know that. So, the answer to this question is you simply forward this one to your public information office and forget it. That's the end of it. You do not respond to whatever his name is, Tom Roberts. You don't do that. There's a few more in here that have some legal things in them. But in the end, when you take this thing, what you're asked to do before you decide what you're going to do with each one of them, the action you're going to take, and the reason, just like that one on number 2, you're going to forward it to public information and that be done with it. The reason why is because every district has a policy that you can't speak to public information without getting given prior approval from the public information office, number 1, and number 2, FERPA, you can't allow the press to get the kids not on school property. But before you get to that, they ask you to classify each of the emails into one of these 4 quadrants. Urgent, important, urgent, not urgent, but important. It's urgent, but it's not important. Not urgent, not important. So what they're going to do when you take this is they're going to flip to this page very quickly before they even read this stuff to see how well you reason. They're going to look at this. If you have any numbers in one of these 4 quadrants, you're out. Which of these quadrants is the idiot quadrant? Which of these, if you put one of these emails in, disqualifies you automatically? Somebody gonna venture a guess here? Number 3. That is correct. There's no such thing as something that's urgent, but it's not important. It can only be urgent if it's important. It's simple. That's a simple reasoning, deductive reasoning equation. If you can't pass that one, you're not gonna, you can't reason and think on your feet well enough to not stay in trouble legally all the time. Most of these questions, as you pointed out, have some sort of a legal landmine in them, and you have to be able to reason through and recognize that. If you can't understand that nothing is urgent and not important, urgent means important. They're synonyms. that if it's urgent, that there's no such thing as quadrant 3. If you have any in that, they'll simply throw your paper out and you don't make the pool. This is just one of many of these kinds of things. So you need to think through these things. You need to think through them and not just go placing them randomly in boxes. So this is the second kind. The third and final kind of what I call cattle call, or the applicant pool interview, is the virtual interview. Now, the virtual interview in itself is a trick. They don't really care what you say. They'll even give you the questions up front and let you prepare. But what they're going to see is can you speak extemporaneously? Do you know this stuff well enough? Is your position firm enough in your heart and in your intellect that you won't have to read it? So when they come on with the virtual interview, they'll give you the questions up front, and they'll give you time, to do that. And then you come online just like we are tonight on Zoom, and they're going to see if you sit and read your questions, or see how, they may even listen a little bit, but mostly they're looking to see your demeanor. If you look down and read your answers, or if you got something, you're out immediately. They're looking to see how telegenic you are. They're looking to see how well you can do on camera. They're looking to see how well that you can speak extemporaneously and think on your feet, even though they've given you the questions already. So the trick is, I'm going to use my hands to demonstrate. On the outside edge of your laptop screen, you need to write all your answers in little yellow sticky notes and stick them around the edge of your screen so you can refer to them. They won't know you're reading your notes. That's the trick. But don't ever look down. Don't ever look away. Don't ever appear as if you're reading. Put your stickies with your keywords around the edge of your screen so you can refer to those, and keep your eyes firmly on the person ahead of you. That's the trick on a virtual interview. The answers are almost unimportant there. They'll just ask you standard stuff that most anybody that's ever even been in a building could answer. They want to see the way that you answer. So that's the trick to virtual interviews. They're not rocket science on those. They give you the questions beforehand. So those are all applicant pool interview types. You may have any one of those. You may have more than one of those types. Somebody said they're definitely going to save this thing for tips. Yeah, that's kind of the idea. So that is that one. All right, now, the second type of interview that you might have would be a group interview. And you have to be real careful not to talk down to people in this one. Group interviews usually lay people, members of the community, parents, concerned citizens, people, and it's kind of like a jury pool. Do you really want to be judged by people too stupid to get out of jury duty? Well, that's kind of the way these group interview people are, is people that wasn't smart enough to get out of this. But so you have to understand, don't talk down to them. As I said, I set up that interview for principal of the year candidates. The young principal came in, and boy, he was a whippersnapper. First thing he did, he brought his folio, his pad, and he sat and he read all the accomplishments of his school. He sat and read them. I was like, oh, that's terrible. And then he would use acronyms. These were lay people. One was a housewife, but after he left, she said, how many times did he call me stupid? When he would say, oh, you don't understand that. I said, I believe I counted 6 times. She said, yeah. She said, I hadn't been called stupid this many times since I graduated from law school. Needless to say, he didn't get any votes for principal of the year. But it's the same way with you. Don't use acronyms. Don't talk EBOS, MTI, RTI, and PLCs. You need to understand your audience. And the reason why you have these group interviews and somebody from the school system is watching is to see how well you can communicate with parents and community members. That's the whole purpose. That's the whole purpose. And so I've got some slides here on interviewing. So they'll ask you, what do you perceive as your leadership style? See, what I'd say with you folks is I'm a transformational servant leader. What does that mean? Nobody knows. This is what it means. You need to say phrases like this: earning respect and trust of parents, teachers, and students by making consistent and appropriate decisions. Child-centered, focused on the issue, avoid personal conflict, striving to be impartial, empathetic, fair, courteous, respectful, willing to listen, responds, timely manner, positive, open to changing new ideas. This is the definition of a transformational leader that you will find out next semester. But you can't just say transformational leadership that believes in shared governance and servant leadership. The lay people in the room will just roll their eyes at you. We hear assessment drives instruction. How would you help a new teacher begin to understand the use of data available in schools to make sound decisions? So instead of saying RTI or EVOS, you say we'll do some data analysis and we'll develop some teacher strategies based on the needs of students. We won't talk about M-class and DIBELS and all that kind of stuff. We won't talk about EVOS growth scores and all that. We'll say it in a way that they understand it. And instead of saying we'll sit down, disaggregate all that data and make a plan in our PLC, we'll say we'll plan collaboratively. Isn't that what a PLC is? You got to be careful. Remember, don't use any acronyms. It's not the military. You can't use acronyms. Describe instructional practices. You know what? I'd say use Marzano's 9 high-yield strategies. They don't know Marzano from Adam's House Cat. They don't know what McReal or the Midwest Consortium is. They don't know that that's Robert Marzano's place. So what you say to them is, we're going to use best practices. Now, be careful when you do that. If they ask you what they are, I'd stick to the ones that they would understand, like cooperative learning, homework. Oh, they'll love that. Guided practice. Questioning and cluing. Stay away from things like non-linguistic representation. They don't know what that is. You can say that we'll do some projects, because that's kind of what that is. We'll do some projects and maybe some non-traditional scoring rubrics, but you might want to stay away from that one too. Effective use of resources and engagement. So I have several of these, but basically what you're so instead of answering this question with PBIS and the MTSS process, which is the answer to this question, you would say it this way. The actual answer is RTI and MTSS, but they won't know what that means. So again, know your audience. The group interview is usually lay people. Might be a teacher sprinkled in if she's got a kid in the school. But there's always going to be somebody from the central office there watching you, or to see how well you can connect with people who aren't professional educators. Because that's one of the you got who are the stakeholders in your building? Your parents and community members, your teachers, and your kids. Those are your three groups of stakeholders. Each of those is equally important. They're looking to see, can you communicate with 1/3 of your stakeholders, parents and community members? If you can't, if you talk over their head all the time, you will not do well in this kind of interview. All the things that we learned about scheduling, about hierarchy, federal law, this is what they're asking for you here, your organizational structure. But don't say organizational structure and master schedule. They don't know what that is. Break it down for them. So that's your group interview. Moving quickly. The 4th level is your principal interview. Finally, you get to show how smart you are. Finally, you get to use every acronym that you know. Finally, you get to speak to somebody who's in the position on an equal level, and you get to trot out everything that you've learned in this program. And that's just wonderful. But then they have a landmine question for you. They'll ask you some easy stuff along the way. You get feeling comfortable and you know the answer to all the things that they're asking you. And then they ask you that trick question. And the trick question is, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Now we've got problems. Let's see if I can find that one. And they'll tell you, about your educational background, work, professional experience, why you want to become an administrator. And you'll be talking in the jargon of administration, and man, you're feeling all comfortable. And then they hit you with this one. What's your greatest strengths and weaknesses? But you can turn that landmine question into a winner for you. And here's how you do it. You got to remember this. If you don't remember anything else I told you tonight, you might want to write this down. Your strengths should always be dispositional. Not going to change. I'm a fully formed adult. I'm on time. I'm planned. I'm prepared. I'm sober. I take a bath. Got on clean clothes. I'm honest. I'm loyal. I'm ethical. I'm moral. I have all of these things. You won't have to worry about me. My weaknesses, they're all based on inexperience. I just haven't been in the job yet. But I know that I've got to get trained. I know what I don't know. I know that I've got to go get trained on Power School, not on the teacher portal, but the administrator. I know that I've got to go get trained immediately to do teacher observations so I can hold up my end on the teacher evaluation matrix of the rounds of evaluations. I know I've got to go get trained on that so I can do my part immediately, so it doesn't overburden my administrative colleagues. I know what I don't know, and I'm willing to go and do it. The reason why it's my weakness is I'm new and I just haven't gotten to do it yet. Or I had limited experience during my clinical. I had enough experience to know that I don't know this stuff, that it's not intuitive, but I have to go and get trained and I have to work at these things. So that's the answer that you've got to give. My strengths are endemic, embedded in me. They are dispositional. They're not going to change. And they're good things, good qualities that we want in school leaders. I'm honest. I'm moral, I'm legal, I'm ethical. I'm on time. I believe in competition and collaboration and all those good things about my personality, about my disposition. Those won't change. My weaknesses are things that I can work on and improve and will get better quickly with training and experience. That's the answer to that question. That is the trick question of the principal interview. Again, I've asked people that question. They tell me, well, I'm not really a morning person, or I really don't like working with adults. No, don't say dumb things like that. That won't keep you from getting the job. The last interview you will have will be with the superintendent or the area superintendent. And he's going to, or she's going to talk to you. She's going to talk to you about big picture. And of course, you're going to say 21st century skills. Look at me. I know the answer. And then the superintendent's going to ask you a really tough question. How do you implement those? In schools that maybe don't even have internet, how do you implement 21st century skills? And you're going to say, uh-oh. But I have a document for you. 6 steps for implementing 21st century skills. Very commonsensical document that leads you, here are the skills, and it says, you start out by increasing awareness in your faculty and your community. You assess the current state. What could we do? Might not can do everything. And you narrow it down to things that are manageable and are possible in your community. Why do you think I had you do a background description of the setting? Why do you think we had you do all those things about knowing the building you're in and talk about goodness of fit? That when you recommend things, it has to be things that, number one, you can afford with money and people. That's why we make you identify those resources, but that is doable in your community. You may not be able to do everything. You got maybe you'll have to narrow it down to the things that you can that are most important that you can afford. Are these ready? Are these documents somewhere? Yes, they are somewhere. I did not upload them until I wanted to go over them with you so you would understand them. I get too many questions when I just put them in before I've gone over them with you. I will upload these under session 10. They will be here for you to download and take with you. But again, I didn't get around to putting them, I did not want you to see them until I talked to you about them. They only make sense in context of knowing what they're there for. So they will be under session 10. So you narrow to a manageable numbers of skills based on what you got. You do some planning. How many times have we made you do an action plan, a marketing plan? You do a graphic organizer. You know how to do a plan. Starts with a specific activity, a timeline, and resources, the goal, the indicator of success, formative, summative assessment. You know how to do a plan. Implementation, evaluation, continuous improvement. So when the superintendent says, all right, wise guy, wise gal, we got you over here to school that only has power 3 days a week. How are you going to implement 21st century skills? And you just run right down that little list right there. And then they're going to ask you, and when you get that one right, they're going to ask you, all right, smart gal, what's this student going to look like when you get through with them? Uh-oh. Very simple. They're going to look like a future-ready student. North Carolina has already defined what they want the outcomes of 21st century implementation to look like in terms of what the school will look like, what the student will look like, and what the leader will do, and what the community will look like. It's all in this one document called Future Ready Students. As a result of implementing 21st century skills that we hear every day, this is what the student's going to look like. If you got time, you need to spend some time with this document. Superintendent's going to ask you 2 questions. How are you going to implement 21st century skills? What's your plan? What's it going to look like? You're always supposed to go into any plan with the end in mind. Isn't that what Collins says? Start with the end in mind on good to great.
That's Covey.
Yeah, well, Collins does that as well. Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, I'm sure everybody knows about getting on the bus and Hedgehog and all that stuff. But Collins always starts out with, start with the end in mind. Covey does as well. All good leaders understand that they must have a vision for what it's going to look like in the end, and then set apart a plan to achieve that vision. This is what it's supposed to look like in the end. So when the superintendent says, all right, when you get all this done, what's it going to look like? Tell me what's going to happen or what the outcome is going to be. It's going to be this. Right there it is. So that's the 4 types of interviews. I know I've run over my time here. I'm going to hit one more. I've got some more documents, not as important. The last one are my tips right quick. Dress for success. Take a 2-page evidence summary of the 6 evidence artifacts. Don't go offering it up, but if you get an older administrator or maybe an out-of-state administrator that says, what is this evidence artifact stuff I hear about? You'll be able to say, I did these 6 evidence artifacts and here it is, and I've got an example of that for you that I'll have posted here of what a 2-page evidence summary looks like. Right here it is. And basically, you've got your numbers of, to show that when, from all of your evidence artifacts, that the point was to make a good number go up or a bad number go down, that you understand that's what the evidence artifacts were for, and that they mimic the school improvement plan process. The APSEL is your instructional component. The APTEL is staff development. The SKIP is parent community involvement. The OMA is your management systems and master schedule. The CAP is your culture, environment, teacher working condition survey, and managing student conduct. Put it all together and it becomes a school improvement plan. That you know how to build a school improvement. That's what you were doing in your task stream portfolio, was learning to build a school improvement plan. And the competency folio was learning how to set aside, identify artifacts, because guess what? When you become a principal, you will be evaluated on the basis of evidence artifacts. Google the North Carolina Principal AP Evaluation Manual, and all it speaks to is evidence artifacts. They even define what artifacts you will have generated, and you should have available. You have a written narrative of what you did. And so folks that didn't come through under this system, they're being evaluated by it now. They may be interested to know what you did. A 2-page evidence summary is always good. be able to tell about your activities quickly. This is your 2-minute elevator speech. Shouldn't take you more than 2 minutes. Research the background of both the school of all the school administrators. Look at the school, look at the state report card and teacher working conditions survey. Know the backgrounds of the team. Again, know what you don't know. Know that you know what these things are, but you haven't been trained in them yet, but you know you'll need to. EVOS, Power School, Power Source, your evaluation system, RTI, PBIS, and finance. Be able to speak to instruction and the bottom line student achievement, but through all of these different products. Have a humorous anecdote about how you were able to turn a negative into a positive. Rarely will you have a personal interview that they don't talk about turning a negative into a positive or a significant challenge you faced. Make sure it's humorous. Be prepared to discuss hours and responsibilities honestly. If you got to pick your kids up at 4 and it's a late start school that gets out at 4:45, that's not going to work. I have a true story to tell about that one, but I'll skip it for tonight. And the building won't get any closer just because you get the job. If it's a 2-hour drive, round trip every day, when you get the job, it'll still be a 2-hour trip round trip every day. With the principal, don't discuss salary, experience steps, national board pay. One of the things that I had you learn this semester is all that stuff's handled through compensation, benefits, HR, central office. Don't ask the principal about that. That makes it sound like that you're only interested in the money and not the work, because they don't have any of that information. They don't know what your situation is personally. They can't tell you about those things. So don't ask. Don't engage in gossip or negative talk. And number 10, this is my number 1 pet peeve. Don't interview for a job you know you won't take. If you know if it takes you 3 hours round trip to get there and back across town through the traffic, that you would never take that job, then don't go interview. Don't request an interview. I've had people dumb enough to come into my school as principal and say, "Oh, I'd never work here. It's way too far from my house. I just want to know what kind of questions you were going to ask, so I'd be prepared when I went to a school I really wanted to work at." Yeah, I've had that happen. Well, my job's not to get as principal interviewing for an AP. My job's not to get you experience. I'm trying to find the best person to come and work with our children and with our staff here, with our family, with our community. My job's not to get you experience. So if you know that you would never work there for whatever reason, then leave them people alone. It will come through in your demeanor and your answers and your dispositional behavior in the interview that you're disinterested. So if you know that it's too far from your house, it won't get any closer if you get the job, then don't go. Don't waste people's time. That's the most important thing, because folks are really earnestly trying to find the best people. And it's not the professional thing to do is go waste their time. All right, as I said, I will post all these documents later tonight under session 10. I've had a wonderful time with you all this semester. I did all the talking, so that means I had a good time. But I hope, I hope we had a plan that when you left here, you'd have a better notion of what the actual operational side of running schools is, and that you could avoid doing some of the things that, abbreviate your career, making those fatal mistakes. But hopefully you have a sense now that we're playing for keeps here. You're moving into a new career where mistakes cost you dearly. You just can't do dumb things. There are legal and financial ramifications if you make mistakes, especially if in the area of negligence. I hope that you learned that this semester. I hope that you will take my words to heart and try to be as far along in the CAP as you can be when the fall rolls around. Not so much that you can't get the work done this fall, but the more you have done, the more time and energy you can invest in the actual course content of 605, which is all about you getting to know your strengths and weaknesses and who you are as a leader, so that you can grow and be better suited for the role that you're aspiring to move into. And so that's kind of my soapbox speech tonight. Thank everybody for participating this semester. I can only guarantee that Blackboard, let's talk about housekeeping. Task stream will be open. You can put whatever, but I can only guarantee that Blackboard will be open through next Monday, the official last day of class. Sometime between then and graduation, they always shut it down. And so I'm going to make grade decisions based on what you've got in at the end of the day next Monday. Dr. Pickard and I and the rest of our faculty meet at 6 o'clock next Monday. And that's go time. We'll discuss any students that need incompletes or withdrawals or medical withdrawals, or everybody else gets a grade when we come out of that meeting next Monday at 6. That's what that meeting is for. That's our end of the semester wrap-up meeting. We do it on the last day of the semester. And then we make decisions right then. If they have questions or issues, we kind of settle them among ourselves, and then everybody goes, puts their grades in, and we're done. So you need to be done by the end of the day next Monday. You can still put things on in after that, but, I can't guarantee how long Blackboard will be open. So try to get everything in by next Monday. Task stream stays open. So try to get your skip. If you don't have your skip, try to get your skip in there at least, next week. Be a good idea. All right. Anything for the good of the group before we go? I ran over 12 minutes tonight. But I was having such a good time. I could win another hour. I'll see you again soon. Everybody have a good rest of the summer. Bye-bye.